I live in Branson, Missouri, and not far from my house sits an abandoned theme park called Celebration City. It has been deserted for more than a decade, closing its gates back in 2008. The park had a theme centered around American life throughout the 20th century. It used to open in the afternoon and stay open into the evening, with each day ending with a laser show and fireworks. The park had plenty of rides, shows, and attractions, and it usually operated from May until about the middle of September. I went there several times as a kid with my family, so when the park shut down, it honestly felt pretty sad for all of us. Most of the roller coasters were taken down before the park closed for good, but even now, many of the buildings are still standing. A lot of people do not realize it, but it has quietly become a pretty interesting place for exploring. My friend, who I will call Calvin, was completely on board with the idea of going to check it out. I asked him because he is a family friend, and our families had visited the park together when we were younger. We drove over and parked in the Steak and Shake parking lot across the street, since the park's parking area had obviously been closed off for many years. It was around 7 in the evening, and the sun was beginning to set. We did not want to go during full daylight because we did not want to get caught or run into anyone else. We brought a couple of powerful flashlights for when it got dark, though at first we could still see pretty well. When there were no cars around, we jogged across the street so we would not draw attention to ourselves while trespassing. After crossing, we cut through the grass and into the trees that surrounded the park property. It was surprisingly easy to slip inside. Honestly, it barely even felt like we were sneaking in at all. I am not encouraging anyone to trespass, but seeing the old buildings and attractions that I remembered from childhood still standing there in a silent and empty setting was incredibly eerie. It felt like a part of my childhood had died. One thing seemed certain, though. We were the only people in the entire place. The only sounds were crickets. We could not even hear the traffic from the road outside. As we walked around, we noticed that a lot of things had been left behind. It was obvious people had come through the park since it closed, because there were writings and bits of graffiti on the walls. But many props were still in place, or sitting behind glass inside some of the buildings. A few of the windows were broken, which showed that other people had forced their way inside and explored as well. As it grew darker, we decided to climb through one of those broken windows into a building. Once we got inside, we realized it was the diner that used to be called the Last Chance Diner. It was completely dark inside and honestly pretty creepy. The front entrance was shut, locked, and blocked off. There were wooden planks and random pieces of debris scattered all across the dining area. The best way I could describe it was that it looked like a storage space. It seemed like things from outside had been moved into the building. Calvin walked off to look around the other side of the diner. I shouted over to him that I was going to check out the bathroom, and then headed that way. The smell inside the bathroom was different from the rest of the building. I could not really explain it. There were 3 stalls in there, and as soon as I stepped inside, I heard a sound coming from one of them. It sounded like something small had been dropped onto the floor. I said hello while shining my flashlight around the pitch-dark room. All 3 stall doors were closed, but something had definitely made a noise inside one of them. I kept the bathroom door propped open with my foot and then crouched down, pointing my flashlight under one of the stall doors. I saw a pair of shoes and legs. I gasped and jumped back before quickly checking under the other 2 stalls. I saw the same thing there too. There were 3 sets of legs and shoes visible under the stall doors. One of them suddenly started moving, like the person was getting down on their knees to look under the stall door. I did not wait long enough to see their face. I was already running out of the bathroom, shouting for Calvin that we needed to leave. I climbed back out through the broken window, and he followed me, not asking any questions until we were already outside and moving away from the building. I told him what I saw in the bathroom, about the 3 people sitting in the stalls. He joked that maybe they were just using the bathroom, but the way he said it made it clear he did not really believe me. I explained that one of them had started moving like they were about to look under the stall at me. As I tried to describe the strange scene better, his expression changed, and he began to look more unsettled. We clearly were not alone in that place. If those people were just friendly explorers like us, who happened to be using the bathroom, I feel like they would have said something when I walked in, or at least when I called out. By the time we left the park and made it back to the car, it was completely dark outside. Neither of us has gone back there since. I still do not have any real explanation for what I saw that night. It was strange, unsettling, and it instantly changed the mood of what had started as a fun adventure. I am a 30-year-old woman who lives by herself in a mid to lower income neighborhood. Crime does happen around here from time to time, though it is not what most people would call a ghetto. Even so, there are nights when living alone makes me feel a little uneasy. I do not really know many of the people who live nearby. The only neighbors I feel comfortable with are the ones living right next door to me, and they are both friendly people. The houses across the street are a different situation. I have barely spoken to anyone there. Knowing the people around you makes living alone feel safer, and sometimes I wish I knew more of them. I have always been the kind of person who scares easily. Because of that, some of my biggest fears about living alone came true one night while I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. It was late on a work night, sometime after 11. While the house was quiet, I heard the faint sound of leaves crunching along the side of the house. I could not tell if it was a person or an animal. There are plenty of stray cats and raccoons that wander around the neighborhood after dark. The next night, something else happened. I woke up suddenly when I heard a single cracking or tapping sound outside my window. At first, I assumed it must have been the window frame making noise. It was October, and the weather was still warm enough that I liked to keep the windows open for fresh air. Without really thinking about it, I called out, "Who is there?" After that, everything went silent. I got out of bed and lifted the blinds to look outside, but there was no one there. After 2 nights in a row of hearing strange sounds, I started to convince myself that I was probably just overreacting to normal house noises. I tried to relax and fall asleep again, but later that same night, I woke up once more. This time the sound was different. It was like scratching or scraping coming from somewhere in the backyard. I could hear it through the window. I got out of bed again and walked into the small living area near the back door. As I moved closer, the noise became clearer. It sounded like a clicking or scraping right outside the sliding glass door. I turned on the light in the room, and the sound stopped immediately. I walked toward the sliding door, which was covered by a curtain. My heart was pounding because I was afraid of what I might see on the other side. Finally, I grabbed the curtain and pulled it open quickly, like ripping off a bandage. There was no one there. I turned on the backyard light and slid the door open slightly to look outside. I felt a moment of relief when I saw nothing out there, not even a raccoon or some other animal. For a minute, I just stood there listening to the crickets. Then I heard something moving in the yard. A rustling sound came from the bushes. I stared at them. The bushes are thick enough that it is almost impossible to see through them, which would make them the perfect place for someone to hide. If that noise was not a raccoon or a possum, I honestly did not want to find out what it was. I went back inside and made sure every door and window in the house was locked. After that, I returned to my bedroom and even locked the bedroom door behind me. About 10 minutes later, just as I was starting to calm down in bed, there was a knock at my front door. That was when I really started to panic. I stayed in bed and ignored it. Nobody should be knocking on my door that late at night. I decided that if it happened again, I would call the police. Thankfully, it never happened again that night. At some point, I managed to fall asleep. The next day, I went straight to Best Buy with my brother. I told him everything that had happened, and he helped me pick out a doorbell camera along with a set of security cameras for the house. Later, we installed the doorbell camera at the front entrance and placed the other cameras in the backyard in spots where they would not be too obvious. My brother also stayed the night with me so I would feel safer. He slept in the guest bedroom. That night, we were both in our beds trying to get some rest when my phone suddenly buzzed with a notification. Motion had been detected on my property. I opened the Ring app and looked at the camera feed. The moment I saw the video, I screamed. The black and white footage showed someone standing at the back door, trying to pick the lock. My brother woke up when he heard me yell. I showed him the video, and he jumped out of bed immediately. Without even putting on shoes or socks, he ran straight out the back door, ready to confront whoever was there. But my scream must have scared the person off, because when we watched the footage again, we could see him running away. My brother stood outside in the yard and shouted as loudly as he could, telling the person to never come back. Whoever had been trying to break in definitely heard him. Unfortunately, we could not see the man's face in the video. He had his hood pulled down over his head and was dressed entirely in dark clothing. In every frame of the recording, his face stayed hidden. He was also wearing gloves, which meant he did not leave any fingerprints behind. We called the police even though we knew there was not much they could really do about it. Still, it felt better to have them come by and make a report in case anything happened again. After that night, nothing like it ever happened again. I hate to sound full of myself, but I know that I am considered an attractive woman. What really frightens me is the thought that the person outside my house might have known who I was. A young woman living alone would seem like an easy target. Sometimes I wonder if the person could have been someone who lives on my street, maybe even one of the neighbors. I guess that is something I will probably never know. When my parents got divorced, my mom ended up with 2 of the 5 houses that my dad owned. My dad runs a very successful real estate company, so growing up we always had several homes in different places. I am 23 now, so I pretty much stay wherever I want, depending on what is most convenient. Lately, though, I spend most of my time at one of my mom's houses because I am closer with her. During this particular week, my mom had gone to our beach house for a while, leaving me alone at the main house. That situation was not unusual for me. I am used to having the place to myself fairly often. The house itself has a somewhat interesting layout. Upstairs there is a kitchen, a living room, and 2 bedrooms. The first floor below, it is set up almost the exact same way, with its own kitchen, living room, and bedrooms. Then there is also a basement underneath everything. My bedroom is upstairs. When I am home, I mainly stay on that floor, using the upstairs kitchen and living room. My mom usually sticks to the downstairs when she is home, so we each have our own space. It works out really well. The house also has 3 separate entrances. There is a front door, a back door, and a side door. The side door leads to the area where the garbage cans are kept. That is the door I usually use when I take the trash outside. Anyway, the strange situation really began when I started noticing that some of my clothes were missing. Whenever this happened, I would call my mom and ask if she had moved anything from my laundry baskets. Most of the time she would say no, which made sense because we keep our clothes separate since we live on different floors of the house. Still, even during those weeks when I was completely alone at home, I noticed that several of my favorite shirts had disappeared. My room is honestly pretty messy most of the time, so at first I assumed I had simply misplaced them somewhere. But after digging through everything in my room multiple times, I still could not find certain pieces of clothing. It made absolutely no sense. Eventually, I even checked my car and looked through the downstairs rooms, including my mom's bedroom, just in case something had gotten moved there somehow. Nothing. After a while, I convinced myself that maybe one of my friends had borrowed a shirt and forgotten to tell me. Or maybe they would just randomly turn up later when I cleaned my room better. I stopped worrying about it. When I am home alone, I usually sleep with my bedroom door slightly open. I do it so that I can hear if anything strange happens in the house, like if someone tried to break in. One night, I was lying in bed, watching a movie on my laptop, when my bedroom door suddenly closed. It did not slam, but it also did not shut gently either. I had both windows open and my ceiling fan running, so my first thought was that it was just a draft. That sometimes happens in the house. But a few seconds later, I heard a sound from the hallway outside my room. My reaction was probably not what most people would do when they are alone in their house. Instead of hiding, I got up and quickly walked over to the door and opened it. The hallway was dark, so I turned on the light and looked around. Then I walked toward the living room area upstairs, expecting to maybe see something strange. No one was there. I still did not feel completely satisfied, though. So I went downstairs to check the first floor, where my mom usually stays. I looked through the living room, the kitchen, and her bedroom. That was when I noticed that the basement door was slightly open. The light switch for the basement is located right at the top of the stairs. It is one of those pull strings that you tug to turn the light on. I pulled the string and started walking down the stairs into the basement. The basement is rarely used. There is a couch down there, a television, a few workout machines, and a small separate room with a punching bag. Other than that, there are 4 doors that lead into storage closets. There is also a very small door that you have to crouch down to get through. It leads into a tiny crawlspace-style storage area. Neither my mom nor I ever really go down there. As I stood there looking around, something in my peripheral vision caught my attention. The little crawlspace door moved slightly. My heart instantly dropped into my stomach. I slowly stepped closer to it, trying to figure out if I had actually seen movement, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. Then everything inside me froze. From the darkness inside that crawlspace, an arm suddenly reached out and gently pulled the small door shut. At that moment, I felt like my heart had completely stopped. I quietly backed away, trying not to make any noise. Then I quickly, but silently, went back up the stairs. All I wanted to do was get as far away from that basement as possible. The first thing I did once I reached upstairs was call 911 and report that there was someone inside my house. I was extremely grateful that I had not made any noise when I left the basement, because whoever was down there probably had no idea that I had seen him. The police arrived shortly after. They came with their lights on, but without their sirens. 4 officers entered the house and went down to the basement with me. They stood outside the crawlspace door and ordered whoever was inside to come out. After a moment, the door slowly opened. A bald man who looked to be in his 50s crawled out with his hands raised. His face looked strange, almost squished, with a nose that seemed too small for the rest of it. What made my stomach turn even more was the fact that he was wearing one of my shirts. Inside the crawlspace, the officers found several piles of belongings that belonged to both my mom and me, mostly clothing. The entire closet smelled strongly like urine, which made everyone wonder how long the man had actually been hiding down there. There was no obvious damage anywhere in the house, except for the urine stains. But because he had taken several of our belongings, he ended up being charged with 3rd-degree burglary. Somehow that was the only charge. My mom and I definitely did not want any of the clothes back that the man had worn. Looking back, I blame myself for what happened. I most likely left the side door unlocked one night after taking out the trash. That was a lesson I will never forget. Always lock your doors. The thought that someone could secretly be inside your home at any time, simply because a door was left unlocked, is something people should take very seriously.